You know, there's something special about getting lost in a game with an amazing story. It's like binging a great show or reading a book you just can't put down, but better because you're part of it. In this video, I'm diving into 15 story-driven games that seriously hit hard and are absolutely worth playing. Let's kick things off with the first one. Judgment. Judgment is one of those games that just slips under the radar for a lot of people, but man, it's so much better than most realize. Coming from RGG Studio, the same folks who brought us Yakuza, Judgment delivers this fantastic story-driven experience with a noir-style twist that's seriously too good to miss. If you're into gritty crime dramas, no real crime dramas, none of that cheesy stuff, Judgment absolutely nails that vibe. You play as Takayuki Yagami, a former lawyer turned private investigator, and right from the get-go, you're thrown into the darker side of Kamurocho where lies, secrets, and cold-blooded murders lurk in the shadows. What really hooked me was the story. It's one of those narratives that keeps evolving as you unravel the layers. You start off thinking it's just about solving one murder, but oh no, it's much deeper than that. Corrupt systems, complex characters with their own motivations, it all blends together in a way that makes you want to keep digging. And because this is from the Yakuza team, there's no shortage of over-the-top wild moments either. You'll be chasing down bad guys parkour style 1 second and grilling witnesses the next. That mix of absurd and serious somehow works so well here. And I gotta talk about Yagami as a character. The guy's slick, like he's got that Sherlock Holmes meets beat 'em up brawler energy, and it's awesome. The detective work is fun, whether it's tailing suspects or examining crime scenes. It's all broken up by some kick-ass combat too. Yagami's fighting style is fluid and fast with a blend of martial arts that keeps things feeling fresh. Plus, they let you really mess with the environment during fights, knocking people into bikes, walls, whatever you can find. Honestly, never gets old. If you're into world building, Kamurocho itself is basically a character in the game. It's this gritty, lived-in city that feels alive. The only thing that can be annoying is the minimap doesn't rotate, so navigation can feel off sometimes, especially if you're like me and get turned around easily. But that aside, I could just get lost in that world. There's a ton of side cases, quirky characters to meet, and even some bizarre mini-games that really round out the experience. One minute you're cracking a murder case, the next you're playing arcade games. It's that kind of balance. Judgment may not have gotten the same attention as some other big story-driven games, but trust me, it's one of the best out there if you want a tale that keeps you guessing. The narrative twists, solid detective gameplay, and emotional depth make it worth sinking hours into. Plus, if you've never dived into the Yakuza series, this is a great starting point since it's technically a spin-off, but you don't need to know any of the Yakuza lore to enjoy it. Definitely give it a shot if you're in the mood for a story-driven game that'll pull you in with a hard-hitting plot and some serious action. Enslaved Odyssey to the west. Now, Enslaved Odyssey to the West is one of those games that just didn't get enough love when it dropped, and I still don't understand why. Like, this is one of those hidden gems that you pick up years later and wonder how you missed it in the first place. Developed by Ninja Theory, yeah, the same team behind Hellblade. This game came out in 2010, but even now, it still holds up. It's got this post-apocalyptic world that's both gorgeous and grim, and at its heart, it's really all about the relationship between the two main characters, Monkey and Trip. The story's loosely based on Journey to the West, which, if you don't know, is this ancient Chinese novel with some really epic mythology, but the way Enslaved translates it to this futuristic setting is pretty unique. You play as Monkey, this tough-as-nails brute who's been captured by slavers. After a wild escape, he ends up tied literally thanks to a slave headband to Trip, a tech-savvy girl who needs his help to get back home. The dynamic between the two is what makes the game so compelling. At first, Monkey's just doing it because he has no choice. The headband will kill him if he doesn't help her, but over time, they develop this really interesting, believable bond. What I love about Enslaved is how it blends action and storytelling. Monkey's this total badass in combat, jumping, climbing, smashing robots with his staff, but the game knows when to slow down and let the characters breathe. On the dialogue between Monkey Monkey and Trip feels natural and human, even in the middle of all the chaos. Their relationship evolves in a way that just feels real, you know. They start out as strangers forced to work together, but by the end, there's genuine care and understanding between them. Ninja Theory's always been great at crafting character-driven stories, and Enslaved is no exception. And visually, man, this game is stunning for its time. The world is overgrown with nature, almost like a beautiful ruin. It's one of those post-apocalyptic settings that's more vibrant than dreary, which feels like a fresh take compared to all the dark, gray wastelands you usually get. The environments are massive and well designed, so it feels like you're really traveling through this broken world. Plus, the platforming sections are fun. It's not super challenging, but it gives you that feeling of momentum as you leap and climb across these crazy structures. The combat, though, let's talk about that for a second. It's straightforward but satisfying. Monkey uses a staff to smash through waves of robots, and the combat feels weighty and impactful. There's a nice mix of melee and ranged attacks, so it doesn't get stale. Plus, Trip's not just a damsel in distress, she plays a real role in helping you out, using her tech skills to distract enemies or solve puzzles. It adds a little bit of strategy to the whole experience. Now, the one thing some people didn't love is that the game's a little on the short side, maybe 10 to 12 hours, but honestly, it's the kind of story that doesn't need to be dragged out. It's tight, focused, and by the time you hit the end, you're left with a really powerful narrative payoff. Speaking of which, the ending is one of those, whoa, didn't see that coming moments. I won't spoil it, but let's just say it leaves you thinking long after the credits roll. Spec Ops: The Line. Spec Ops: The Line is one of those games that seems like your standard military shooter on the surface, but trust me, it's anything but. This game goes deep, and I mean deep into some really heavy stuff, making you question pretty much everything by the time you're done with it. It came out back in 2012, and I think it's still one of the most underrated narrative-driven games out there because, let's be real, it didn't get the attention it deserved. You'd be forgiven for thinking it's just another bro soldier shooter, but it's more like Heart of Darkness meets Modern Warfare, with some Apocalypse Now thrown in for good measure. You play as Captain Martin Walker, leading a small squad into a sandstorm-ravaged Dubai to find a rogue colonel and his battalion. Sounds straightforward, right? Yeah, that's what you think in the beginning, but Spec Ops: The Line isn't just about shooting bad guys and saving the day. It's about the cost of war, and not just in that vague war is bad kind of way. The deeper you go, the more messed up things get. Walker's descent into madness mirrors the chaos happening around him, and soon you're not even sure who the enemy is anymore. The whole game plays with your expectations, and by the end, it forces you to confront the horrible things you've done, things you probably didn't even want to do, but had no choice in. What really sets this game apart is how it messes with your head. The decisions you make feel awful, and they should feel awful. There's one scene in particular, if you've played it, you know exactly what I'm talking about, that just guts you emotionally. It's rare that a game goes out of its way to make you feel genuinely uncomfortable, but Spec Ops does, and it does it well. There are no heroes here, just people trying to survive in a situation that's spiraling out of control. And it's not just the narrative that's intense. The setting Dubai is this haunting, beautiful place buried in sand, with skyscrapers half collapsed and buried like tombs. The environmental storytelling here is top-notch. You're not just moving from point A to point B, every part of the city tells a story. It feels desolate and eerie, like you're walking through the remains of a civilization that was lost long before the game even starts. Combat-wise, yeah, it plays like a third-person cover shooter, but honestly, that's not the point. The mechanics are solid, but the real focus is on how the story unfolds around you. The further you go, the more brutal and disorienting everything becomes, not just for Walker, but for the player too. The game does this thing where it blurs the lines between Walker's hallucinations and reality, so you're never quite sure what's real. It really nails that psychological horror angle in a way that most shooters don't even attempt. So if you've been sleeping on Spec Ops: The Line, it's time to wake up. It's not just a game, it's an experience. It takes a hard look at the ugly side of war, trauma, and morality in a way that few games have dared to do. And even though it didn't blow up when it launched, those who have played it know it's something special. If you want a story-driven game that punches you in the gut and makes you think about it for days after, this is one you need to play. Just be prepared to feel a little broken by the end. Valiant The Great War. Valiant The Great War is one of those rare games that manages to tell a powerful emotional story while still keeping you engaged with its gameplay. Set during World War I, it's a puzzle adventure game, but it's so much more than that. The art style is beautifully hand-drawn, which gives it a unique charm, but don't let that fool you, this game hits hard emotionally. It's based on real events and letters from soldiers, so the story feels grounded, even as you switch between different characters who all have their own personal stakes in the war. What really stands out about Valiant Hearts is how it humanizes the war. You're not playing as a one-man army mowing down enemies. Instead, you're solving puzzles, helping people, and just trying to survive. You'll play as a mix of characters: a French farmer, a German soldier, a Belgian nurse, and even a dog, and each of them is dealing with the horrors of war in their own way. The storytelling is subtle but impactful, making you care deeply about each character as they navigate the chaos of the trenches. Gameplay-wise, it's simple but effective. You're solving puzzles and navigating through the war-torn environment, but it's the emotional weight behind everything that keeps you hooked. The game isn't about fighting, it's about survival, loss, and the human cost of war. By the time the credits roll, you'll be left reflecting on the lives lost and the impact of war, which is something very few games manage to pull off this well. Valiant Hearts may not be an action-packed blockbuster, but it's a story-driven experience that's too good to miss. If you're looking for a game that'll make you feel something while offering a unique look at history, this is the one. Tell me why.
Feels impossible.
Tell me why is one of those narrative-driven games that hits you right in the feels. Coming from Dontnod, the same team behind Life is Strange, you know you're in for an emotional roller coaster. The game follows twins Tyler and Alison Ronan as they return to their childhood home in a small Alaskan town to unravel some deep, buried family secrets. What I really love about Tell Me Why is how it weaves the supernatural with the deeply personal. Tyler and Alison have this unique twin bond that lets them communicate telepathically, and you use that connection to piece together memories of their troubled past. The catch? Their memories don't always line up. That twist makes the storytelling fascinating because you're constantly choosing which version of events to believe, which directly impacts how their relationship and the story unfold.
Whenever we see or hear something really emotional.
The game's pacing is slower, but that's intentional. It's all about letting the characters and story breathe. You spend a lot of time exploring, talking, and making choices that feel significant not just in the moment, but for the characters' futures. In the town of Delos Crossing, where the game is set, is quiet and small, but it has this deep sense of history that feels almost like a character in itself. Every interaction feels meaningful, and you really get a sense of the weight the past has on these two characters. This isn't an action game, it's more about slow, thoughtful moments, where the dialogue choices and relationships matter way more than anything else. The small Alaskan town you explore feels like it's frozen in time, kind of quiet, kind of eerie, and full of history. The pacing is slow, sure, but that gives the characters room to grow. By the end, it's not just about uncovering family secrets, but about healing and moving forward. So, if you're into games that make you feel things and leave you thinking afterward, Tell Me Why is the one to check out. It's not long, but it packs a punch.
I can't do this. Stop!
A Way Out. So, A Way Out is a bit of a wild card in the story-driven game category, but it's seriously underrated for what it brings to the table. First off, it's strictly co-op, which means you have to play it with someone else. There's no solo option. That might sound like a pain, but it's actually what makes the game so damn cool. Whether you're playing online or sitting next to a friend, the way this game forces you to work together is genius. You play as two guys, Leo and Vincent, trying to bust out of prison, and well, things get pretty crazy from there. The game's story is classic prison break stuff at first, but it quickly evolves into this full-blown action adventure. You're not just planning the escape, you're getting involved in between shootouts, car chases, and emotional confrontations. It's a wild ride that balances high-octane moments with deeper, more personal story beats. Leo and Vincent's dynamic is great too. They're different guys with different motives, and the game lets you see both their perspectives, which keeps things interesting. The coolest part though is how it handles co-op. Sometimes you're working together, but there are moments where one player is doing something completely different, like one of you might be sneaking through a building while the other's in a full-blown action sequence. The split-screen view adds a layer of intensity to the game. It really forces you to communicate with whoever you're playing with, and when things get tense, you're both right in it together. The narrative isn't just about the prison break either. As you get deeper into the game, it shifts focus to the personal stakes for both characters, and man, the ending, let's just say it's one of those no way moments that sticks with you. It's got twists, emotional gut punches, and all the drama you could want in a co-op game. If you and a friend want a story-driven game that feels like you're starring in your own action movie complete with betrayal, revenge, and a lot of emotional beats a way out, is one of the best out there. It didn't get the hype it deserved, but trust me, it's a blast. Beyond Two Souls. Beyond Two Souls is one of those games that either clicks with you right away or leaves you scratching your head, but when it clicks, oh man, it really gets you. From Quantic Dream, the same team behind Heavy Rain, this game is all about narrative choices and, of course, emotional storytelling. You play as Jodie Holmes, a girl who's connected to this mysterious entity named Aiden. And honestly, that's what makes the gameplay so unique. You're not just controlling Jodie, but you also get to switch to Aiden, who's like this invisible supernatural force that can mess with the world around her. The game jumps between different parts of Jodie's life, so one minute she's a little girl trying to understand what's going on with her, and the next she's in full-on CIA action mode. It's a little all over the place in terms of pacing, but it keeps you hooked because you're constantly uncovering more of Jodie's story. The game's got that signature Quantic Dream choice system, where the decisions you make impact how things play out, but what I love about Beyond Two Souls is how personal it feels. Jodie's life is shaped by her connection to Aiden. Sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a curse, and you feel that tension all the way through. The relationship between Jodie and Aiden is at the heart of the game, and it's so fascinating to see how it develops, especially since Aiden isn't exactly a regular sidekick. There's a lot of emotional weight to their bond, and the game makes sure you feel it. Now, this isn't a game for people looking for tons of action or complex mechanics. It's more about the narrative and the emotional journey, which is pretty much Quantic Dream's whole thing. You're here for the story, the characters, and those tough choices that sometimes don't have a right answer. And visually, it's gorgeous, especially for its time. The facial animations, the environments, it all adds to that cinematic feel. Beyond Two Souls might not be everyone's cup of tea, but if you're into deep, emotional storytelling with a supernatural twist, it's definitely worth a look. It's one of those games that sticks with you, especially because of its more intimate, character-driven focus. Plus, the whole life-spanning story structure keeps it fresh the entire way through. What Remains of Edith Finch? Man, What Remains of Edith Finch is the kind of game that leaves you thinking about it long after you've finished. It's not your typical game. There's no action, no puzzles that'll melt your brain, but somehow it hits harder than most games that do have all that stuff. It's more like an interactive storybook, but not in a boring, just click through the story way. This one's different. You play as Edith Finch, returning to your ridiculously huge, bizarre family home, trying to uncover the mystery of your family's tragic history. And believe me, there's a lot of tragedy. What makes this game stand out is how it tells each family member's story. You're not just hearing about what happened to them, you're experiencing it. The way each narrative unfolds is totally unique. One minute, you're a little girl imagining you're a cat jumping through the trees, and the next you're in this dream-like sequence that gets so surreal, you forget you're playing a game. It's the kind of thing where each family member's tale is told in such a creative, almost hauntingly beautiful way that you can't help but feel like you're reading these old, forgotten memories. Now, This game does something I love. It turns mundane things into something special. You'll be walking around this big, weird house, opening up doors to hidden rooms, climbing into spaces you probably shouldn't be, and it all feels like you're uncovering some big secret. But the real secret is that this game isn't about solving some big mystery, it's about life and death, and how those two things are woven together. It makes you feel the weight of each family member's life, even if you only know them for a few minutes. The Finch family is cursed, or at least it feels that way. Everyone meets a tragic end, and it's hard not to get a little emotional as you move through their stories. One story in particular, no spoilers, but if you know hit me like a truck. You go from feeling curious about these strange, tragic deaths to questioning how fragile life really is. It's a short game, sure, but it's the kind that leaves a mark. It's not about the length, it's about the experience. The visuals are stunning in a quiet, poetic way, and the soundtrack, it's like it was made to punch you right in the feels. By the time I reached the end, I didn't feel like I had just played a game. I felt like I had walked through a family's entire history, lived their lives, and understood them in a way that only video games can really pull off. If you've been sleeping on what remains of Edith Finch, do yourself a favor and give it a shot. It's not loud, it's not flashy, but it's human. And sometimes that's the most powerful kind of story.
I can already imagine the sun on my face.
The Forgotten City. The Forgotten City is one of those games where you start playing and before you know it you're sucked in, like you don't even realize how deep the rabbit hole goes until you're neck deep in conspiracy theories, ancient Roman laws, and moral dilemmas. Originally a Skyrim mod, it blew up and became its own standalone game, and thank God it did, because this one is a wild ride that blends mystery, philosophy, and time loops in a way that just feels fresh. You wake up in this ancient Roman city where, get this, everyone's living under a curse. The deal, if one person sins, everyone dies. So no pressure, right? Your job is to figure out who's gonna break the golden rule and stop it before it happens. But here's the kicker: every time things go south, you get thrown back to the start, Groundhog Day style. It sounds repetitive, but the way the story unfolds keeps you constantly hooked. Each loop gives you more info, more clues, and you start piecing together this massive puzzle. And the writing is so smart. Like, it's not just there to fill space between running around, it makes you think. The dialogue is where the game really shines. Conversations aren't just about picking the right choice, but about digging into philosophy, morality, and what it means to sin. You'll be debating with Roman philosophers, trying to weasel information out of guards, and dealing with gods. Yeah, literal gods.
Everyone will die.
What's really cool is how it plays with time. You're in this ancient world, but it doesn't feel old, it feels alive. The city itself is beautifully designed, and the way you explore and uncover secrets makes it feel like every corner holds something important. There are no filler moments, no wasted space. You're constantly learning new things, meeting new people, and uncovering layers of the mystery, and trust me, the mystery goes deep. By the time I hit the end, I was questioning everything I thought I knew about the game. And don't even get me started on the moral choices. They're not just black and white, good or bad, they're layered with nuance, and sometimes the right choice doesn't feel great. The game isn't afraid to challenge you, to make you uncomfortable with your decisions, and that's what makes it so memorable. The Forgotten City doesn't need flashy action or massive set pieces. It relies on the strength of its story and the way it pulls you into this weird ancient world. It's a game that takes its time but rewards your curiosity with one of the most satisfying narratives I've played in a while. If you want a game that'll make you think while keeping you glued to the screen, this is it.
Salve, friend.
Is Dusk Falls. As Dusk Falls hits you right in the gut with a story that feels raw and messy just like real life. The game isn't flashy, it's not about big action sequences or epic battles. Instead, it focuses on the little moments, the tough decisions, and how a single night can change everything for a group of people stuck in the middle of a robbery gone wrong in small town Arizona. The way the game looks might catch you off guard at first. It has this unique art style that feels like a mix between a graphic novel and a stop motion film. It's different, different, yeah, but once you settle into it, the focus shifts to what really matters to characters and their choices. You're not just clicking through dialogue for the sake of it. You're making decisions that actually feel like they matter, and it's hard to predict where things will go. Sometimes you make what seems like a small choice, and it snowballs into something massive that turns the whole situation on its head. What's cool about this game is that it doesn't just stay focused on the robbery itself. It goes deeper, looking at the aftermath, how everyone's lives are affected, and how things can spiral out of control in ways you didn't see coming. You switch between perspectives, seeing things from both the robbers and hostages sides, and it adds layers to the story you don't usually get in these kinds of games. It's also a game you'll want to replay because no two runs are going to be the same. Your decisions really can lead to different outcomes, and not all of them are pretty. Some of the consequences can be harsh, and it makes you sit there wondering what you could have done differently. This isn't a game for people looking for fast-paced action. It's more for those who want to dig into the complexity of human behavior and see how far people are willing to go when their backs are against the wall. If you're into games that let you really sit with your choices, as Dusk Falls brings that in a way that feels raw, messy, and honestly very human.
Family means sacrifice.
Pentiment. Pentiment is one of those games that feels like a weird anomaly in the best way possible. It's a slow burn historical narrative set in 16th century Bavaria, and honestly, that alone sounds like it shouldn't work in today's gaming world. But it does, and it's clear the team at Obsidian poured a lot of love into this project. You play as Andreas Mahler, an artist caught up in a murder mystery that spans decades. The game's all about dialogue choices and figuring out what kind of person Andreas is as he navigates a time where religion, politics, and art were all tangled up in one messy knot. Now, I'm not going to lie, this game is niche. It's not for everyone, and that's kind of what makes it special. It's very text heavy, but not in a boring sit here and read forever way. It feels more like being part of a living manuscript with hand-drawn art that looks straight out of a medieval book. The game actually makes you feel like you're stepping into history, complete with all the weird quirks, tensions, and dramas that come with that time period. And here's the thing, it's not just a history lesson. You're not just learning about the Reformation or the Holy Roman Empire. You're actually in it, dealing with real people, real conflicts, and tough decisions that feel weighty because of how well they're tied to the time and place. The choices you make as Andreas aren't just about picking a good or bad option, it's more about who you are in that world. You'll shape him based on where he studied, what languages he speaks, and what he believes in. And that stuff actually matters. It impacts conversations and the story in ways that feel real and important. You're not just playing through a murder mystery, you're living through it, and the game's slow pace lets you really soak in the details. Visually, it's stunning in a way that's totally different from most games. The art is heavily inspired by illuminated manuscripts, and every scene looks like it was meticulously crafted. It's not trying to be flashy or modern, it's sticking to its roots, and that's what makes it stand out. Every dialogue choice, every scene feels like you're flipping through an ancient book that's somehow come to life. At its core, Pentiment is about stories, how they're told, how they shape us, and how they get passed down. And yeah, it's a slow burn, but if you're willing to dive in and get lost in the world it builds, it's one of those games that stays with you long after you've finished. It's a game for people who want to savor the experience, not rush through it. The Sinking City. The Sinking City is a weird, unsettling trip that sticks with you. It's like someone took a detective noir story, dumped it in Lovecraftian horror, and then set the whole thing in a city that's literally sinking into madness. You play as Charles Reed, a private investigator with a haunted past, trying to figure out what's going on in this decaying, half-flooded town of Oakmont. The deeper you dig, the crazier things get both in the city and in Reed's head. What really makes the Sinking City work is the atmosphere. Oakmont is eerie in all the right ways. The streets are flooded, and there's this constant feeling of decay and isolation. It's not just the monsters that creep you out though, trust me, there are plenty of those, but the way the city itself feels alive in a really unsettling way. It's gloomy, it's weird, and it's not not a place you'd want to hang out in yet. Somehow, you can't stop exploring it. The investigation mechanics are the real meat of the game. It's not like your typical follow the waypoint detective game. You actually have to piece together clues on your own, which feels way more rewarding. You'll be gathering evidence, connecting dots, and figuring out who or what is behind all these strange happenings. It's a refreshing take on detective work because it makes you feel like you're doing the heavy lifting rather than just being guided from point A to point B. Combat, though, can be a mixed bag. It's serviceable, but it's not what you come to the Sinking City for. The monsters are gross, disturbing, and often hard to kill, which kind of adds to the tension. You don't feel like a superhero running around blasting through enemies. Instead, there's this constant sense that you're barely holding it together, which honestly fits the whole losing your sanity theme. It's not about being powerful, it's about surviving. What I dig most about this game is how it blends the detective stuff with the horror. It's not just about solving crimes or shooting monsters, it's about slowly losing your grip on reality. The more you uncover, the more you start questioning what's real and what's just a figment of Reed's unraveling mind. It's got that slow burn psychological horror vibe, and it works. The choices you make throughout the game can lead to different endings, and none of them are exactly a happy ending because, well, it's Lovecraft, you don't really get happy endings here. Murdered Soul Suspect. Murdered Soul Suspect is one of those games that had such a cool concept, but it flew under the radar for most people. You play as Ronan O'Connor, a detective in Salem, Massachusetts, who gets murdered at the start of the game. And yeah, that's where things get interesting. You're solving your own murder as a ghost. It's a neat setup, and from the get-go, it's got this eerie supernatural vibe mixed with a noir detective story, which makes for a pretty unique experience. The game is all about piecing together clues, and since you're a ghost, you've got some pretty interesting ways to do it. You can pass through walls, possess people to read their thoughts, and even mess with objects to influence what's going on in the world of the living. It's not a traditional detective game where you're just picking up evidence and interrogating people. Here, you're using ghostly abilities to uncover the truth. It sounds cool, and when it works, it really draws you in. But the game isn't all detective work. There are these creepy demons that show up and hunt you down, which forces you to sneak around and avoid getting caught. I won't lie, these sections can be a little clunky, but they add some tension to an otherwise slow burn investigation. The best part of Murdered Soul Suspect is the setting. Salem is packed with history, and the game leans hard into the whole witch trials vibe. You're walking around this haunted town, seeing the echoes of both past and present. There's something cool about solving a murder while also uncovering the secrets of a place so tied to paranormal lore. The atmosphere here is spot on. It's got that spooky, small-town mystery feel that keeps you engaged. Overall, Murdered Soul Suspect might not be a groundbreaking detective game, but it's got enough charm and uniqueness to make it worth checking out, especially if you're into supernatural mysteries. It's a short experience, but if you're in the mood for a ghostly whodunit that's more about atmosphere and storytelling than hardcore action, it's worth a look. Firewatch. Firewatch is one of those games that sneaks up on you with how personal and intimate it feels. At first glance, it's just you, a walkie-talkie, and the Wyoming wilderness. You play as Henry, a guy trying to escape some serious life problems by taking a summer job as a fire lookout in the middle of nowhere. But here's the thing, while it might seem like just a walking simulator, it's so much more than that. This game is all about human connection, loneliness, and the way we handle the stuff life throws at us. The game's heart is the relationship between Henry and Delilah, your supervisor who you only ever talk to through your walkie-talkie. You never see her face, but man, the voice acting is on point. Their conversations feel real, sometimes awkward, sometimes funny, sometimes heavy. You get to choose how you respond, and those choices shape their bond. What's crazy is how attached you get to someone you've never even met. It's all about that back and forth, the banter, and the way they open up to each other over time. As for the world itself, gorgeous. The art style is stunning in a minimalist way, bright, bold colors that make the wilderness feel both inviting and isolating. You're just out there wandering through the woods doing your job, but there's this underlying sense that something is off. The isolation starts getting to you, and as the mystery builds, you're never sure if what's happening is real or just in your head.
The first sign of smoke. What's wrong with you?
Excuse me?
People take
The story takes some interesting turns. Without spoiling too much, you start to wonder if there's something more sinister going on. The tension builds slowly, and there's this constant question of whether you're just imagining things or if there's a real threat out there. It's like one part peaceful escape, one part psychological thriller, but at its core, it's a very human story about dealing with guilt, regret, and the choices we make. Firewatch doesn't have action or puzzles. It's a game that's more about mood and emotion. The whole experience is around 4 to 5 hours long, so it's a quick one, but it packs an emotional punch. If you're into games that are less about mechanics and more about storytelling, this one's worth checking out. By the time the credits roll, it feels like you've been through a real journey, just you, the wilderness, and the connection you've made along the way. Ryse Son of Rome. Ryse Son of Rome is like stepping into the middle of a big budget Roman epic. Right from the start, you know what you're getting into: flashy, brutal combat, and a whole lot of look how cool this is moments. You're Marius Titus, a Roman soldier who's seen some serious stuff, and after your family is murdered, you're out for blood. The story is simple, classic revenge stuff, but it's the way it's presented that makes it feel larger than life. First off, the game is gorgeous. Even years after release, Ryse still holds up as one of the most visually stunning games. Ancient Rome, the battles, the way the light hits your armor, it's just dripping with atmosphere. The attention to detail is insane. Like, every scene is meant to be a screenshot. You're in the middle of these massive battles, and it feels like you're in a Hollywood movie set, with all the chaos and grandeur you'd expect. Combat, though, that's where things get interesting. It's all about timing your attacks, stringing together combos, and landing these brutal cinematic executions that make every fight feel satisfying. But I'm not gonna sugarcoat it, the combat can get repetitive. You're basically doing variations of the same thing throughout the game / block, execute, repeat. It's fun, especially early on when you're just enjoying the flow of it, but after a while it can feel like you're going through the motions. That said, those execution animations never get old. They're over the top and make you feel like a total beast. What really sets Ryse apart is how it handles the big battles. You're not just out there swinging a sword, you're leading troops, commanding formations, and strategizing in the heat of combat. There's this sense of scale that few games capture so well. You feel like a cog in this massive Roman war machine, and it's honestly a lot of fun. There are moments when you're leading a charge, shield up soldiers at your back, and you can't help but feel like a total boss. The game does a great job of making you feel powerful without drowning you in complicated mechanics. And then there's the story. It's not reinventing the wheel, but it's got all the drama and intrigue you'd expect from a Roman setting. Marius' journey is packed with betrayal, political maneuvering, and enough twists to keep things interesting. It's kind of like watching one of those historical action films where you already know the beats, but you're still along for the ride because it's so damn fun. Plus, they throw in some Roman mythology and divine intervention just to keep things spicy. So, if you're looking for something deep and strategic, Ryse might leave you wanting more. But if you're craving a game that makes you feel like a Roman badass and looks incredible while doing it, this is the one to pick up. It's pure, stylish fun, and sometimes that's all you really need. Well everyone, that was all for this video. I really hope you enjoyed my list. I was getting many comments about mentioning some underrated games and those that I haven't really talked a lot about before. So here you go. Now make sure to subscribe and leave a like. I would really appreciate that. Have a good day, and I will see you in the next video.